Hello, everyone, and welcome to Magma Ragers episode 41. We have the whole crew here. I'm joined by Pandemonia and Zamok, and it's been the first week of Kobolds and Catacombs since our last podcast. So there's a lot to discuss. We're gonna jump right into it. How's your week been so far? Let's start with Pandemonia.
Oh, it's been great. I love it. Fresh meta. You get to play against the most weird and wonderful things. You don't know what to expect. And then obviously also, I've been enjoying the dungeon runs quite a lot as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I know you're definitely try-harding those dungeon runs so you can get that card back as fast as possible. But
Damn straight.
yeah, but I mean, like I played a little bit of them, mostly in downtime and whilst I was doing other things. Because the one nice thing about dungeon runs, I must say, and especially when you're playing on your phone, like I would play them when I was like cooking supper and stuff like that. Because the nice thing is you don't have a
It's
turn
not a
time.
timer.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
you can just put your phone down, and it also won't like uh, lose focus and then disconnect you, thankfully. Um, which it will
It
kill your
does.
battery though. Oh, it does. It doesn't do it on
If you
iPhone.
disconnect though.
No, but I mean, it won't. It won't. It won't like um, lock screen. At least not on iPhone.
Oh right. Okay.
So even, no matter how long you leave it, from my experience. So yeah. So I mean, I think it's really fun to do that. I've just been picking all the meme stuff and not try harding them at all. But yeah, I mean, I definitely think they're a great addition. Even though they do seem somewhat RNG based, but honestly, that's kind of what you expect from a roguelike
Awesome.
mode. Well, I was gonna say a roguelike mode,
It's a joke.
right?
It was a
Like,
joke. It was a joke. Oh.
yeah, but a Hearthstone roguelike mode in particular. So Zemok, how's your week been?
Well, the Hearthstone that I have played has pretty much just been ranked. I did a bit of Dungeon Run on the first night, just out of interest in seeing what it was about. I really enjoyed it, and I think that it's an awesome addition to the game. Something that I really like about it is that with any solo adventure mode, you can basically endlessly disconnect and reconnect. And this is like a bit of an abstract thing, but when I go on like road trips, I'm only 13, so I never have to drive, and I'm often playing Hearthstone in areas where like the connection dips out, and I know that those dungeon runs they offer so much replayability, especially like with all the different classes and the amount of different bosses that you can get. There's so much replayability, and I know that on those like road trips, I'm going to be playing a ton of dungeon runs. But the little bit that I have played, I've thoroughly enjoyed. I think it's an awesome feature, and I'm going to enjoy a lot of that. And ranked has just been really cool. Seeing like a new meta is always interesting. Every deck's given a chance. Apparently, aggro's taken over a little bit now. I haven't really seen that at like rank 11 where I am. But I'm gonna probably do a legend push this month actually. I think because I have time. And I think new expansions. It's always more interesting at the very higher ranks because you get to see kind of like where the top players are leaning towards already. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So yeah, that's been my experience for the first week. But we'll get into the decks that we've been playing just now as well,
yeah, yeah.
which is cool.
Yeah, we will. For me, I was kind of like messing around with a few of my own builds, particularly Miracle Rogue to start off with. But
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the meta has got a little bit more aggressive, largely thanks to Team Lull, I would say, which we'll be discussing later as well in the ESL Trinity series stuff. I think they've been pretty influential on that, bringing a lot of aggressive decks that did well for them. So I mean, when I switched to those aggressive decks, though, all of a sudden my win rate kind of went through the roof. Like I was hitting like 80% win rate with like three different decks. So that was like pretty insane. Around to like 10 to 20 games on each of them, as then I was kind of switching once I got an idea for the deck and I wanted to try something different. And I mean, if we talk about one of the first decks that actually kind of got me on that kind of win rate was Tempo Burn Mage. So I mean, I actually crafted Aluneth for this, and we'll get to the crafting decisions a little bit later. But basically, the idea with this is like Aluneth is your refill for a deck that's very aggressive, and I think the real big card that makes this possible, more so than just Aluneth, is Explosive Runes as well. It just gets you that extra face damage in, and it also like protects your minions, right? So instead of, let's say, just getting Mirror Entity where you get a minion and then you probably just trade the minion into their minion that they summoned if they can't deal with the minion immediately. Explosive Runes gets you damage in, and then it usually leaves you with your minions on board being able to go face as well.
It's
Uh,
such a strong card.
yeah,
It's like
especially something like Kirin Tormage. So it's so nuts when you play like Kirin Tormage, Explosive Runes on 3. Like they can't play anything into it. They have to play a minion to proc the explosive runes. But when they play a minion, the minion dies, they take damage, and then the Kirin Tor Mage pushes face again. And so you can just go very, very aggressive like that. And the Aluneth is actually just super massive refill. Um, this is basically just a deck I put together myself, which is a relatively cheap deck, actually, I suppose. Bar, Aluneth is the only legendary in it. And otherwise, I'm playing Ice Block, but that's not 100% necessary if you don't have. I just feel it sometimes allows you to get that one extra turn you need to find the race damage. There was also another deck that Team Lull played, which is probably a little bit more of a refined deck in all honesty than mine. It also had one of the big menaces of the meta at the moment, which is Corridor Creeper in, which I wasn't actually playing. This is kind of a deck where Corridor Creeper is a little bit more iffy maybe. But their deck also has the double Frost Nova, so it's much more on that like freeze burn plan. Not like freeze
That's
mage,
cool.
but like what we
So
were doing earlier KFT meta as well, with
yeah,
the
I
freezing the
remember
board and
beginning of
just going
Agora as
face.
well.
Yeah. Was that in Goro when we were doing that? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, that was the thing that I was playing a lot in Go.
Yeah,
The one that I got was in Go actually.
and they also even
Oh,
have Leroy Jenkins in for extra burst
is
damage.
that the version they're playing? That's kind of like piqued my interest now.
Yeah,
'Cause,
yeah.
no, well, it's a deck that I played a lot in the past. That kind of like aggro deck where
Yeah.
you play Frost Novas just to kind of stall the board and focus on going face and not have to worry about them.
Yeah.
It was like a deck that I really enjoyed. Like as I said, I got Legend with it in Ungoro meta, like my own build. And since then, it's kind of slowly gotten worse and worse and worse. And I guess with that, I haven't thought of it, but with Alieneth, it could be a lot better.
Yeah. Aluneth is just
I don't know,
crazy for that
interested in
kind
trying
of deck.
it. Yeah.
Because like you never have to worry about drawing cards, and explosive runes is just extra
Yeah.
face damage in those kind of scenarios.
Well, yeah, explosive rune is just like, I mean, we shouldn't talk too much about like, I don't know, take forever because like the decks are so interesting, especially at the beginning of an expansion. But explosive rune is really worth talking about, I think, because it's in our not in our review. Sorry, we did like a when
we
we were
didn't do one
discussing
for mage, but I wrote down mages, and explosive runes was a 5 for me. I was a
Yeah,
little bit
I
wrong
think
on
I'll-
Aluneth. I only had that at like a 3. I thought maybe in the future, but like turns out now is good enough with this kind of aggro deck.
But when we discussed it, or I think it was you and I, we kind of also came to that like it's a really really good card because it always does something. It always either like damages your opponent's minion to the point where it's killable very easily, damages your opponent's minion to the point where it just dies, or deals immense face damage to your opponent.
Yeah.
Like it's such a good card, especially in those that aggro mage. It's just like it's like a proactive vaporize kind of thing
Yeah.
that has like an upside. So I think that's one of the cards that's actually carrying mage a little bit.
I definitely agree.
I'm not saying it's the sole reason, but it's definitely a big factor in mage's success at the moment. And I'm slowly seeing just in my playing, mage has risen in popularity a lot the past day, like day and a half or so. I think it's also, as you said, Team LoL released their deck list yesterday. But yeah, it's a very good deck.
Yeah, but I mean, there was also one of the other teams, I think it was Liquid, also did really well with an aggressive mage, similar kind of theme at Trinity Series. So, we did see it doing quite well. And I think Explosive Runes is really the card that's allowed the mage to push like this, just giving it more damage. But ultimately, like, Aluneth is probably more of a key card in this deck because you want to be able to draw your cards more consistently. And honestly, Aluneth is a card you keep on the mulligan. That's how important it is in this deck, keeping a 6-cost card. Yeah.
I haven't played, but
because basically the thing is you get as much chip damage as you can before turn 6, and then turn 6 you play Aluneth, and then from then on you're just burning face to win. Hopefully, that's like the general game plan. Not always. Sometimes you can take value like value options with Aluneth on the board, but in this Team Lull version in particular, you're generally just gonna go face. In the version I was playing where you had like Violence Portal. Yeah, in the deck I was playing where you had Violence Portal, sometimes you used value Violence Portal rather than the aggressive ones. But yeah, we can move on a little bit from this deck to one that Pandemonia says he's been playing a lot. And this is Kokosas's Aggro Paladin, featuring another really important this is an important epic from the new set, and that's Call to Arms. So, what is it that makes Call to Arms so good in this deck and makes this deck so good?
So you've got a lot of quite valuable, quite a lot of 1 and 2 drops. So, Argent Squire and Righteous Protector are pretty good just to put in the battlefield. You're not losing any value in terms of battle cries. So that's what makes that particularly great. Then, also, so far I've encountered there's quite a lot of sort of interesting combos with Core to Arms. So when you pull Knife Juggler, you get the hits. When you pull Dire Wolf Alpha, it allows you to immediately get better trades.
Yeah.
So
and also, if you pull like Deckhand with a weapon out, it actually has charge.
Yeah.
So that's also
So there's a lot of sort of refill.
cool thing. Yeah, and I actually the juggler thing with Call to Arms is definitely something I missed, and actually something that's really powerful. And the Call to Arms deck I'd built before the expansion, I had gone with the Killer Seth route instead, hoping to actually buff up the minions and then pull out some buffed up 1-drops. But the Juggler is almost enough reason to not play a Killer Seth version of the list. The one surprising inclusion in this list for me was the Drygulch Jailer. How have you been finding Drygulch Jailer? It's just for those who don't know, it's a 2-mana 1/1 with Death Rattle, add 3 Silver Hand recruits to your hand. So those still cost 1 for 1/1s.
So I'll be very honest. Initially, I wasn't sold by it. When we did the reviews, I really didn't think it was a good card. But after seeing the list and trying it out, it actually has performed a lot better than I expected. It's especially got synergy with your Knife Juggler. It's got synergy with the legendary weapon Valenier, as well as even sort of a mini refill of the board with Sunkeeper Tarim. So turn 7, turn 8, you can spam a bunch of 1-mana 1/1s and just get a semi-decent board again.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me that was.
I suppose it's another card that's not too bad to pull off Call to Arms.
No, not at all.
Because it's got the Death Rattle, will give you some value in your hand. It's a bit counter synergistic with Divine Favor though, because you have to actually clear those 3 1/1s out of your hand. But that also gives it, the synergy with Knife Juggler, as you mentioned. So definitely an interesting inclusion.
And then just the Valenier has really good synergy with Leroy. There's quite a few times where I've managed to kill someone, and because they were not expecting Leroy to come, they were not planning for 10 damage.
Yeah. Valenier also gives you some synergy with the Drygulch Jailer, so when you're able to play a 1-mana 5/3, that's a much better value for having those Silver Hand recruits in your hand.
Yep.
I think that there are maybe some slightly more optimized versions of this list that we've seen. This was very much a kind of day one list, basically, right?
Yeah.
So we'll definitely give deck codes for this list, but I would encourage people to look for other aggressive paladin lists. I built my own as well, but I honestly haven't tested it enough, and mine was more built around the Murloc shell, which is what I've seen to be the more common option. But we wanted to include something slightly different to the Murloc shell. That's why we're discussing this list. And speaking of different decks, next we have Zamox's deck, and this is a Madame Goya Shaman. So
it's a budget deck.
Definitely not a budget deck, for those that didn't realize that was sarcasm. Why have you chosen to go with Madame Goya Big Shaman almost here?
So I crafted Madame Goya in Tilt a long time ago. It was a Tilt craft.
Like my Prophet Valen craft.
yeah. We've all been there. We've all had our Tilt crafts. So anyways, I crafted Madame Goya a while back, and Goya Shaman, believe it or not, was relatively successful a while ago. Asmodia popularized it initially, got rank 1 with it. This is a few metas ago. In fact, towards the end of that meta, someone finished rank 2 legend with it, if I'm not mistaken, that initial meta. And then Goya Shaman disappeared. It wasn't very good. We lost Healing Wave, which just like a bunch of things kind of went against it. And I thought, you know what, here's a new expansion with Healing Rain is really what inspired me to try this again. I thought, now there's a new opportunity to build a control shaman that has game against decks that aren't just aggro. And that's where Goya Shaman comes in. Goya Shaman is basically it's big shaman in a way. It's a very slow shaman deck that can go very big very quickly. You've got cheap cards like your Earth Elemental, a 5-mana 7/8. And then Ken, Blood Oath, Lich King, your Sarah, your Shards. These are the big cards in the deck, really. And then you've got cards like Barnes to bring them out early, get those end of turn effects on your Sarah, Lich King. And then what really brings the whole deck together is a card called Ancestral Spirit. It's a card that it's a rare. It reads, it's something like give a minion death rattle, resummon this minion.
Yeah.
So often what you're trying to do is you're trying to, on turn 6 or turn 5, if you have the coin, you play Barnes, get something like your Lich King, and then you cast sorry, I'm trying to find my list now again.
Ancestral
Just posted.
Spirit.
Ancestral Spirit. Yeah, you cast Ancestral Spirit on it, and once it dies, it resummons that minion. It's an extremely powerful effect. Extremely powerful. One thing I will say about this deck is that it with relative ease shuts down aggro like a fair amount of time. I'm not playing at a very high rank. As I said, I've been slowly going from the higher ranks to the lower ranks. I'm only at rank 11 now, but I've been playing a lot of this list throughout the climb. It struggles against Priest, Razaka's Priest, as to be expected. It's a problem that it does, but the deck also can beat Razaka's Priest. You've got cards like Can. Can is so good against Priest. And if you get an early Sarah pull with Madame Goya shuffles a minion into your deck and pulls another one. Kind of like recruits a minion from your deck in exchange for a minion that's already on the board, in a way. If you get your Sarah, it's like game ending against Razor Priest, and I have won a few games. In fact, I won a game against Razor Priest yesterday where I ended the game with 4 Ysterias on the board because I played double Ancestral Spirit on it and then intentionally killed it just to immediately get that effect.
There's also the lesser Sapphire Spellstone, which can be quite key to get extra value from those cards, which is also why you have more of the Overload cards in the deck. And also you have like just a lot of AoE. That's the one big thing that sticks out to me right now about Control Shaman in general. And you know, there's so much AoE, the Maelstrom Portals, Lightning Storm, Volcano, and Double Devolve as well. Yeah, like it's a lot of AoE, and that's kind of one of the biggest strengths that these kind of Control Shamans have right now. In fact, I was also playing a bit of a Control Shaman myself, but I was playing something very different with more the Snow Fury Giants and the double lesser lesser Sapphire Spellstones, so that you could just double a couple Giants, and then you get like 4 8/8s on the board. And then all of a sudden, you know, you have 24 damage staring them down. 32 damage staring them down.
Spellstone is very, very strong. Like, and it copies. If I play Ancestral Spirit on a minion and then I Spellstone it, it copies the spell. And the thing is, it's so easy to proc the lesser Spellstone because I've got double Crushing Hand that's immediately upgrades it, and I've got double Earth Elemental that immediately upgrades it. The deck has so much AoE and Overload at the same time. It's very strong. I will say that there are definitely better ways to build an anti-aggro Shaman.
Yeah, I would definitely rather go for the Snow Fury Giants kind of finishes if you want to go for just pure anti-aggro, because it gives you more flex slots. You know, you don't have to have Ken, Goya, your Sarah, your Charge. You don't have to have those kind of things. You can have more.
You can't play those smaller minions if you're playing these big things instead. You know what I mean? Like as your Sarah and your Charge, because you have to basically have the foresight. Like, okay, a big part of this deck, it's not just a meme. It's called Goya Shaman because a big part of the deck is Goya something on turn 6. Yeah. You know what I mean? Or
hero
you want
power, ideally before hand, and then you Goya the totem.
Yes. And you can't. So for that reason, I can't play Doomsayers. I'd love to play Doomsayers. I can't play Jin. You want Water Speakers? I can't play that because I can't. I don't want to Goya into that. It's just terrible. I don't want to play. What's the 0/3 totem? Forget.
Manatide
totem. So these are like alternates, and I think there's probably if we go into a very aggro meta, I don't think we necessarily will, but it's more than possible. If we go into a very aggro meta, I think that Control Shaman might be the answer, just with the amount of tools that they got in this expansion, and Crushing Hand and Healing Rain, especially. Healing Rain is amazing. That card is amazing, not just for healing your minions, for healing your hero, and not just for healing your hero, but for healing your minions. People underrate that. No, I joke, but I'm saying, people underrate one against the other a lot of the time. Like, I know initially I was like, okay, this is great for healing my face, and then when I'm playing it, I'm like, okay, this is actually very good for healing my minions as well, and it's something.
And the fact that it does both at the same time is really, really good.
Yeah, excellent card. It's a extremely expensive deck. It's 7 legends and 8 epics, so it's like half the deck. It's above rare rarity. It's super expensive. But if you have the cards, or you need like, I don't know, 1 epic to make the deck work, It's a lot of fun. Oh, like double Farsight. That's a random thing that's in the deck, but it's excellent. It's a really fun deck to play, and it does deal with aggro relatively nicely. Well, pretty nicely, I'd say. Yeah, just a cool deck. What I've been playing mostly the first few days of this expansion.
Okay.
If you guys have any
Yeah,
questions.
that's pretty interesting. I'll just briefly show the deck that I've been playing on screen here. It's more of like a slower, a more controlling version. You know, like you have some of the early game with like Stormforged Axe even that I'm playing to get the extra overload count as well for the spell stones. And then also with like double Snow Fury, and I eventually cut it down to one Arcane Giant and one Spirit Echo, just to give some kind of just to make more space for early game and you know important cards like Manatide Totem and that. But
Yeah.
you know that's kind of a different way you can build it to be more anti-aggro to give you more of those slots we were talking about. I just wanted to at least show that on screen briefly, but we can move on from this. I also don't think this is anywhere near an optimal list, by the way.
Yeah, I was about to say, like, I feel like this. We don't need to get very into it, but I just feel like there's you've got a lot of flex in this list that you've a lot of flex in this list that you've shared. So I think your list though can go somewhere into that anti-aggro shaman that we might need in the coming meta. Who knows?
Yeah.
You've kind of got a closer shell.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on. Now we're going to talk about some cards that are possible early crafts. Now, obviously, we're really early into this Kobolds and Catacombs meta, so it's impossible to really say, this card's a safe craft, this card isn't. But right now, we can kind of look at some of the key cards and go, if you craft this now, at least it'll be good for you in the short term, and hopefully kind of sticks around for the long term in terms of how you spend your dust. And the one card that's really sticking out is Corridor Creeper. This is an epic 7 mana 5/5 that gets cheaper for every minion that dies, basically, whilst it's in your hand. So with the decks that we saw very popular in the Knights of the Frozen Throne meta towards the end, a lot of these board-based decks, your Tempo Rogues, Zoo, even your Shamans, a lot of them trade minions a lot early on, and especially with patches coming out, that's just an extra minion that gets traded early on. And when you're then just trading, now you have the real high role of playing a cheap Corridor Creeper at the same time. 1 mana, 2 mana, 0 mana Corridor Creeper, and that can allow you to get really far ahead. Whilst you make these value trades, you can then also just play the Corridor Creeper, and now you've got a big 5/5 on the board. I relatively reliably get it down on like turn 4 or earlier, especially if it's in the opening hand. It's actually a card that it's a 7 mana card you probably keep in your opening hand. Like Alaneth is for the Tempo Mage deck.
Well, depends against what deck you're playing. Just note that it definitely depends on against what you're playing.
But against like Warlock, where it could be either one, Control or Aggro Warlock, sorry, Control or Zoo, you're gonna probably keep it a lot of the time because even if they board clear, you get to play it for free.
Yeah, like there are definitely like a few considerations. Like I would say if you're going second, you probably keep it most of the time, like almost always. If you're going first and you don't have a good hand, obviously you ditch it. But if you're going first and you're against another aggressive deck, maybe then you keep it as well because you'll be able to get it on turn like 3.
It also slightly depends. Like if you're mage playing Corridor Creeper, you don't keep it as much as if you're rogue or Zoo.
You're not gonna I just want to say before we go further into these cards, like these are cards that like as Dib said, that it's very difficult to say whether the cards will actually stick around in the meta. And so most of the cards that we're going to talk about are very like we think they're good. They should be good, but there's a small chance that they won't be. I myself am actually a little bit short on dust this expansion, so I'm not even going to be crafting some of the cards we're talking about yet, just to wait and see. So if you are very short on dust, or you want to know what is the absolute cards that you can craft now, and you're not going to have any worries about them just disappearing out of like good decks, Corridor Creeper is probably that card. It's like so strong. We see it in almost everything. Almost no chance that it'll just disappear. In fact, I'd say there's pretty much no chance that it'll disappear. Whereas other cards that we're going to talk about, we could see, because there's no way to know in the early stages of a meta which way it's going to go.
Especially for class cards. Corridor Creeper is by far the standout neutral right now.
Yeah.
And it is an
And
epic,
it's
so
like,
it's something that most people will definitely not have 2 copies of unless you opened quite a few packs or got quite lucky. So it's definitely something to consider for crafting. It's also much better as a caveat if you do have patches. Uh, Honestly, it's still playable even if you don't have patches, but if you do have patches, it makes a big difference because you can play it more aptly in those kind of style decks. Panamonia, what are your thoughts on Corridor Creeper?
I'll be very honest. It's one of the cards that I think in the review we got wrong quite horribly. If I recall correctly, we all pretty agreed that it was quite terrible.
I had it at a 3. I actually went back and watched the review to see. I was the highest on it, but I didn't think it was going to see play yet. That's what I said.
Yeah, I'll be very honest. I was surprised. Like it was one of those cards you could see it being good, but just the 7-mana 5/5 didn't sound good enough. But obviously now when people are actually playing it, it seems to be quite good. And when you trade and
Yeah.
basically refill, it kind of gains you that tempo back after trading. So I
Yeah.
think it's quite powerful in most decks. I mean, I think it probably is going to be like the bone meal of the set in a way. I think in that most decks will just get better with it. I think.
Yeah, it is kind of looking like that at the moment. I definitely do think that it might get a little bit worse after patches rotates out, and it will be worse in metas where you don't have these kind of board-centric decks trading with each other. But even occasionally it can be used by control decks, like if you play Twisting Nether, if you play any kind of board clear. We even seen it in some Razakis Priest decks, where you go like Dragonfire Potion, then you might be able to play a Corridor Creeper. And even if you're a control deck, just getting down a free 5/5 to then contest the board in the future can save you a lot of health. So, Corridor Creeper has use in everything from aggressive decks to even control decks, and that's why it seems like a relatively solid craft at this stage. Okay, but moving on, one of the cards that we mentioned in the very first deck, that Tempo Mage or Burn Mage. I don't actually want to call it Burn Mage because Burn Mage was a different deck before, but this is like aggressive Mage, aggro Mage.
Aggro burn.
Aggro Burn Mage, yeah.
This
That's
is
the
what we
problem with
initially
Mage
was
deck.
calling, because remember
Yeah.
we always called this version of Mage Burn Mage.
Yeah. And now
Yeah,
then
there
Burn
was
Mage become like the Medivh Mage thing. Anyway, so Alaneth is the key legendary from.
Wait, no one's tried Burn Mage yet, huh? Sorry, I know this is a bit off topic, but no one has tried like a Burn Mage, have they?
Not quite. I mean, this is what you would do for Burn Mage. Like the Team Love You Lots version is, I think, as close as you get to Burn Mage. It has
No,
the
no,
double
I mean,
Frost Nova, or what you're talking about. Like, this is definitely the closest.
no, I mean I mean actual Burn Mage.
No,
Like,
I know, but this has
yes.
double Ice Block, and it has
Okay.
everything you would put in that deck. It just has explosive, uh, explosive runes because it's so good. So you have to play the secret package, basically. That's the moral of the story with this deck. Anyway, so Aluneth is the card we're talking about here. Explosive runes is rare, so it's good to craft if you don't have it, I suppose.
I had to craft 2 of them.
But if more likely people are going to have to craft Aluneth for this deck, and I think it is a good card. The one thing to bear in mind is that Aluneth is definitely meant for more aggressive mage decks. So if you're crafting Aluneth, don't expect to be putting it in your control mage decks if that's the kind of mages you prefer playing, because you're basically just going to overdraw yourself and fatigue yourself. I have fatigued myself many a time with this deck. And basically just been looking for that last bit of burn on the last few cards to win the game. And that's also why the Team Love You Lots version that has like Leroy Jenkins in as well is nice because it just has extra burn basically. But yeah, so this is definitely something you want to be looking to play in more aggressive mage decks. So if you strictly like playing control mage, maybe this isn't a card for you to craft. Even though at first you're like, oh, insane value, I can draw so many cards. Turns out you actually have to dump your hand in order to make use of the cards you draw. So, yeah, Alaneth definitely something for aggressive mages. Your guys' thoughts on Alaneth?
Yeah.
There's a card. I mean, I think we did kind of speculate that it might actually, ironic, even though initially it looks like a control card, that it would probably might end up being, in the more aggressive decks that need the refill. And Zamox shaking his head.
No, because I never even I immediately was like, this is not controlled. Like, This
Well,
will
what I'm
kill
saying
you.
is generally people look at it.
Oh,
That's
you're
what
saying
I'm
like
not talking
people
about
see
you.
draw and they're
I'm
like,
talking about general people. You say see draw cards, and you think control instead of an
yeah.
aggressive deck,
I mean, I didn't
etc.
think the weapon was going to be good. Don't get me wrong, but like,
Yeah.
I'm
Anyway.
surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. Go on, Panamana.
Yeah, that's all I want to say.
Okay. Yeah, so Alaneth, good aggro card. If you really want to play that style of mage, I think you can climb pretty well. I think it does quite well right now against a lot of the decks, even against Tempo Rogue and stuff. The ice blocks make a big difference against those kind of matchups, and having two is actually pretty good there as well. So that's definitely a card that can help you there. And then another card from one of the decks that we mentioned is Call to Arms. Has this card been super key in the performance of the aggro paladin for you, Pandemonia?
Oh, definitely. Like that's kind of I think one of the cards that honestly makes the deck good is the fact that you get to. It's kind of like a mini refill.
Yeah, I was about to say it just refills the board, yeah. Because I was
Like
also playing with that same list that you played a bit. I was actually playing with one Call to Arms, interestingly enough, because I didn't have a second copy and I didn't really want to craft a second copy. It was noticeable. It was noticeable not having the second copy. I think it's a very good card. But I worry that I don't know if it's out of the cards that we've mentioned so far, it's the least safe craft, I think, because I think that aggro paladin, there's so many different ways that it could go right now.
Sure.
And I would wait on that one.
I think Call to Arms will be a key part of any aggro paladin deck, but ultimately it is kind of a question as to whether aggro paladin itself will be as
Yeah.
good going
Well,
forward.
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, I
It's
mean,
not,
a lot of the times, honestly, you look at Call to Arms, you're getting roughly like 6 stats, especially if you weight your deck more heavily with 2 drops than 1 drops. You're
yeah.
looking at like 6 stats, and that's pretty good from 4 mana cost. And when you split them across a couple bodies, it also sets you better up for your buffs in following turns, as well as setting you up better for something like Cobalt Scalebane on 5, you know? Also, if you happen to have Corridor Creeper in hand, it makes Corridor Creeper cheaper when those other minions die. So there's actually a lot of advantages to getting that kind of stat split across the 3 bodies.
As well as like the various battle cries and buffs. So, for example, like I was mentioning, Knife Juggler and Double Alpha gives you additional value almost immediately as well.
Yeah.
So it allows you to.
Sorry,
Sorry.
not battle cries, because obviously Call to Arms
Oh,
won't
not battle
have
cries. I
activating
meant
battle cries. Yeah, the
extra effects.
yeah, enters play type effects that we see on like Knife Juggler, and then obviously the buffs like you're talking about with the Direwolf Alpha.
But yeah, I mean, also like the list with Coco Salsa, it has double divine favor. So the whole point is you can go kind of a little bit all in. Then if things go pear shaped, you've got Call to Arms to refill the board, and then divine favor to refill your hand.
Yeah.
So
I've definitely had that deck played against me a few times, even today still, so it does still seem popular. Another card that I found thoroughly frustrating on ladder, especially playing these aggro decks, has been Void Lord. This 6 mana 3/9, oh sorry, 9 mana 3/6 um, Demon Lord thing that when it has Death Rattle, that when it dies summons 3 Void Walkers, 3/1/3 taunts. So this has been a card that's been played a lot with cards like Master Oakheart, which can bring it out, which can recruit it essentially for free if you line up your deck correctly in these kind of control warlock decks. So it definitely seems like a good option for the more control focused warlocks. This is one of the cards, unlike the other ones we've spoken about, that's more geared towards control decks. So if you really like playing control warlock decks, I think Void Lord is actually a key part of control
yeah.
warlock going forward, especially with Blood
I
Reaver
agree
Gul'dan.
with that. Yeah,
Like,
I can agree with that. It's a very strong card.
yeah, honestly, even if control warlock will always be somewhat playable, except when we've got lots of
In
like
tournaments,
Razor priests and you know um, decks that can just burn you down around. Those are kind of the biggest issue for control warlock. I think the secret mage, for instance, is this aggressive mage we've been talking about. It is very much something that beats up on the control warlock because it's very difficult for the control warlock to heal enough in order to actually survive the mage's damage. Because
what
you
heal
can just burn from face.
does it have outside of Gul'dan at the moment?
So I've seen some lists playing that 3 mana 3/3 that restores 2 health to all your characters. So it heals
You haven't seen the 4-mana 4/4, eh?
No, I haven't. I haven't seen any of that. Otherwise, there's the lesser, the spellstone. That's the other big heal. So you're playing the
Oh yes, the
homunculus
last.
and the cobalt librarian, which immediately seemed like zoo cards, but as a way to activate your spellstone, the lesser amethyst spellstone, I believe it is. That is obviously a spell with lifesteal, so that can be pretty powerful.
Yeah, I've had that against me. I was playing aggro paladin, and when they kill your guy, your big guy, and heal 7, it's quite
Yep.
painful.
Yep, I've had that
Oh,
against me as well.
is the maximum version do 7?
Yeah. 4
Yeah,
mana,
deal 7
7
with
damage
lifesteal.
with lifesteal.
How much mana does the card cost?
4.
Oh wow, that's a
So
good
it's
card.
4 mana, 3 damage first, then 5 damage, then 7, and all of them have lifesteal.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that can be quite powerful for control warlocks. Obviously, the one thing with control warlock, it is generally a relatively expensive deck, so you're going to want to make sure you have Blood Reaver Gul'dan first of all, I think, before crafting Void Lords. If you have Master Oakheart, that can be really nice, although honestly it's not entirely necessary. You could definitely make a control warlock without it. But there's, definitely a few key cards you do need to help. Twisting Nethers help a lot, especially to clear the turn before if you have to play your Void Lord if you're playing it. Honestly, you can kind of play the 5 mana 2/2 that recruits demons as a way to cheat out the Void Lords sometimes. But ultimately, I think that Blood Reaver Gul'dan is the key card you want to make sure you have first before crafting Void Lords.
Definitely.
And then another deck that was like a pseudo control deck in a way. In some matchups, it does act like control, and that's a Razakis Priest. And the one card that seems pretty decent to add to that is Psychic Scream. Something that's caught me off guard once or twice, as I kind of forgot about it when coming up against the Razakis Priests. It just gives you that extra board clear, basically. The caveat with Psychic Scream is you kind of only want one copy of it, because right now it's mostly just playable in that Razakis Priest, obviously.
You will only play one copy of it.
Yeah, Dragon Priest doesn't really play it because it has
it's
other kind of
Dragonfire.
board clears with the double Dusk Breakers and double Dragonfire Potion. So yeah, Psychic Scream, something you'll only really need one copy of, and something that does seem good if you want to play a lot more Razakis Priest. I don't see it going anywhere in terms of the future of Razakis Priest, but obviously Razakis Priest is not going to be around that long. When the next set comes out and the next rotation happens, we will see Raza the Chained leaving the standard set. So that is a little bit of a caveat for Psychic Scream, but if that happens to be your favorite deck or something, then Psychic Scream can definitely be a good card to add to that deck. Have you guys been equally surprised by Psychic Scream?
I have faced Psychic Scream only once, and that was when I far-sighted into Ysera, and I played Ysera on 6, and then he Psychic Screamed me on 7.
Oh.
And then I drew Ysera, and I coined Ysera on 8. That's the only... It's the only, and then he conceded. That's the only experience that I've had against Psychic Scream. So it's not a great card in my opinion.
Good. Yeah, I get that you're joking. It's actually a good point that it does help you deal with some of those bigger minions, even if you're using it as a single target to like remove your Sarah in a way, to at least buy time until they can play your Sarah again. So it is actually a good point that it is really good against those kind of boards as well. The boards
like
that can be set up.
It does what Thing used to do. What's that card now? Yeah, that one.
Not really though, because it's better than Light Bomb against in a lot of scenarios, like against Ysera, against Malygos. It's much better than Light Bomb because it can remove dragons, unlike Dragonfire Potion, which is, and it can remove minions that are statted such that their health is a lot more than their attack, like Ysera and Malygos. So Psychic Scream, pretty powerful, but definitely don't craft the second one for now, at least. Okay, so any other cards you guys want to maybe add as ones to look out for to craft? I mean, those are the 5 that we kind of immediately picked, but maybe there's some cards that you think people could have on their radars.
I think like they're rares, so a lot of people don't care. But if you're like a very budget player, or you're just very, very stingy with the dust, which I know newer players definitely are. Like I remember for me, like I would take a lot of time like contemplating whether I should craft a rare or not when I first started playing, I would say cards like Explosive Ruins,
Yeah.
excellent rare. It's not going anywhere. It's a great card. As long as Mage is a thing, Explosive Ruins will be a thing. I will also say the Jade Spellstone.
Yeah.
I'm
Jasper
not the
Spellstone.
sorry, not Jade.
The Druid
Jasper,
one.
yeah, the Jasper,
Jasper
the
Spellstone.
Druid, the Druid. I just associate Druid and Jade together.
Yeah, it is green, to be fair.
The Druid Spellstone is very, very strong, and I also don't think that's going anywhere. So I think just on rares, I know it's like for a lot of people it's like simple, but those are two rares that you can definitely consider crafting if you are trying to be very stingy on your dust, or very careful with your dust rather than stingy.
Okay. So moving on to our esports segment, we've kind of mentioned it a little bit briefly already, but there was, of course, the ESL Trinity series that happened over this week. And if you didn't get the idea from what we were discussing and how successful Team Lul's deck lists were, they did manage to win. They actually put in an immense amount of preparation for this, and it turns out their preparation told them that Corridor Creeper was good. The Trinity Series, for those who don't know, is a team tournament, 3v3, where the players have to bring all 9 classes, and you ban 2 of your opponent's classes and then self-ban one of your own in a best of 11, last hero standing. So Team Lull absolutely swept on the first day. I think they won 6-2. On the second day, they won their winners bracket game 6-1, and then they won their final game 6-2 as well. So they absolutely crushed the tournament, and Corridor Creeper was one of the big standouts for them. A card they picked up that not many other people picked up on. And the way the meta worked, because this tournament happened so soon after the expansion, it was really interesting to watch. And another thing was, a caveat they added to the rules was that the teams could resubmit after each day. So the tournament happened over the Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So you saw a lot of the other teams bringing in Corridor Creepers as well, but it seemed like nobody else had good enough lists compared to Team Lull. And basically, Team Lull also didn't have to reveal much because it was last hero standing. They only had to use 2 decks on the first day, and then only they used 3 decks on the first day, and then 2 decks on the second day. So they had a lot of interesting choices. One of the other interesting things they had was the Spiteful Summoner. Another card we didn't really like that much, but quite frankly, personally, I missed its use in Paladin. Yes, but you liked it for Mage, where it's bad. But they liked it for Paladin, where you can run very few spells. Just basically, they were running Call to Arms, Spike-Rich Steed, and Dino Size. So they got some really ridiculous scenarios. There was one game where they got Rin, the first disciple from the Spike-Rich Steed, which was just a hilarious game to watch, but one that was actually really, really close. Yeah, they played Rin, and they played every single seal, and Azari.
Oh,
And they still lost. Spoilers. But that was still a really good game to watch, and a good example of how to actually pilot against those kind of things. So the one thing that I want to point out about their preparation, and this is something they briefly mentioned when they were interviewed during the tournament, what they actually did was they played the expansion before the expansion came out. They made physical fake copies of the card. Well, not physical, but they made
But
fake.
they played on a test server.
No, there's no test server.
They played on a test server.
No, they made their own game for it. They played with proxies, essentially what we would have done in like Magic or something. They played with proxies, and they had a spreadsheet for RNG. So what they did is, like, if you're rolling for Spiteful Summoner, for example, they had a spreadsheet for these are all the 6 drops, these are all the 8 drops, and they'd be like, this is the one I got. And like they were saying in the one test example, Muzzy was just like, I got the best one. Because he got like Tyrion from his Dino Size. Because that's basically how they did it. They had like a spreadsheet, and they had run tons of like games between each other with that system, which is a really hectic system to use before the expansion came out. They all stopped like streaming and stuff a couple days, or basically since the full card dump. Like Zalay just stopped streaming, and they said that Zalay in particular said this is the most prepared he's ever felt going into any tournament, the most favored he's ever felt because of the preparation they put in. I think it was just really awesome to see that they went so above and beyond what most people would have done for preparation. Everyone else grinded as soon as the set came out. They put in lots of preparation. They theory crafted decks beforehand, but not many people actually kind of got some hands-on play with the cards in their like really ghetto form that they did. And I think that's the real big thing that stands out to me. How much good work they were able to put in. They also had the support cast of Ike and Amnesiac that were helping them with deck lists and testing, and so that really helped. Like that like 5-person play group put together some ridiculous deck lists that just enabled them to crush the tournaments, and it was for uh, $75,000 or something. I think first prize.
150. Well,
No, first
sorry.
place alone was $75,000. So it's the
Wow.
biggest tournament outside of HCT basically. Although I'm not actually sure about GCWC and whether that's more. But anyway, the biggest, let's say, Western tournament outside of HCT. So, I mean, I just think that that kind of preparation is like really inspirational to me as like a competitive player. Seeing the lengths they went to, and that's the one big thing that I think is super awesome about their victory. For those who don't know, Team LOL was Chucky, Zalay, and Muzzy. Basically, they were all not on teams at the start of this. Now Zalay is on Omnistone, um, and Chucky and Muzzy are still free agents essentially. Um, but yeah, so basically they brought all aggro decks. Their Razika's Priest was the only deck that didn't have two corridor creepers in, because of course it can only have really one copy of a card. And they actually had a really interesting Razika's Priest, with a lot of the dragon stuff, Duskbreaker, even in Zoth, an Obsidian statue. Just a really interesting list. So it was quite interesting to see their deck lists, and they were also opting to ban Warlock a lot of the time. Basically, throughout the whole tournament, they banned Warlock and Priest instead of Druid and Priest, which is what a lot of other people did. And I think that's largely because they had all these aggro decks. They were feeling pretty happy against Druid. So yeah, I mean, I think a great performance from them and deserved winners for ESL Trinity Series, which is an absolutely amazing tournament to watch for those who haven't seen it before. I definitely encourage you to go back and watch the VOD. There's so much to learn from that tournament. And another team tournament that actually happened over the same weekend. And one of the reasons Team LOL was actually there is they finished fifth in the regular season, so they wouldn't have actually qualified. But Planet Odd were actually off in China playing GCWC, so they declined their invitation, and Team LOL got in because of that. So they actually just kind of scraped in and then managed to win the whole tournament. They beat Team Liquid. Sorry, so the full standings were Team Liquid, I think, came second. And then Complexity third and Virtus Pro fourth, if I'm not mistaken. I might have third and
Oh,
fourth
I
mixed
was
up.
gonna say, I thought you were talking about Thing for a second there, because I know Planet Art came second at the other thing, didn't they?
Yeah, no, I actually don't know. I don't know the full rankings for that one. I just know for GCWC it was the, I don't even know what the team was called. It was Mitsuhide, Tom 60229, and Tiddler Celestial. I'm not sure what name they were going under as a team because they're not really a team in terms of they don't all belong to the same organization as players. So I'm not actually sure what their team was called, but they managed to win it. Obviously, all three really, really good players. The one weird thing, though, when I was watching a little bit of GCWC was that the way they'd structured that tournament is the deck lists were submitted earlier before the expansion and stuff, and so they couldn't change to the new expansion. So they were playing on like this weekend, but on without any of the new cards, which felt quite weird. Um, but
That is
yeah.
quite
This is a
funny.
weird because the random effects don't obey those rules.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. So yeah, it was quite weird to watch. And then there was another fun tournament, an individual one that happened over the weekend, which was the Hearthstone Invitational that happened in Sydney, and the local boy Navi Ut won that, getting a good win for him. It was a tournament with basically invited players. There was, I think, Ant. I had the full list of players. In fact, I had all their deck lists. But yeah, so there was Ant. I think Alistraza was there. I actually can't remember exactly who was at the Hearthstone Invitational. There was so much Hearthstone to watch this weekend. They
I was
were
about to say
playing with the
too much to watch.
Yeah, they were playing with the new cards. So if you want to watch that, go ahead. But I would definitely advise Trinity Series. That was the main thing I had my focus on personally. I thought it was really, really enjoyable. Any other closing thoughts on you guys? What are you looking forward to doing this week? What's What are your plans for the new expansion now before we close off tonight's episode?
Well, I think we should say that for any South African listeners, there's a tournament actually later this week, hosted by Troll Esports.
Yeah, this weekend.
I think 1,000 rand for first place. That's like if you are maybe a budget player or you weren't able to buy packs for whatever reason. Now is an opportunity to maybe buy some packs. If you like, maybe you want to play and stand a chance to win some packs. So that just keep an eye out for that. Go on Facebook. There's a post there somewhere. We'll probably link it to the maybe in the link in the description of the YouTube video.
Yeah, or search for Troll Esports on Facebook.
Yeah, Facebook. Yeah. So keep a lookout for that if you want to maybe just get in some local competitive Hearthstone in the early days of the expansion. That's always a lot of fun.
Yeah.
I myself am going to be maybe starting to, as I said, I'm going to be doing like a bit of a legend push later this month, probably, just because it's interesting, early days of the expansion, and also maybe doing a bit of prep for that, actually. Just new tournaments in the beginning of an expansion are always very interesting and lots of fun to play against. So I'm looking forward to that, especially.
Yeah, and it is going to be last year's standing tournament, I believe. There is a link. Yeah, it's hosted on BattlePie, so BattleFi. So it's 1,000 rand for first. No, sorry, it's 1,000 rand prize pool, 600 rand for first, 300 for second, and 100 for third. So even if you just make it to the final or something, you'll still walk away with some money that can help fund some more packs. So yeah, definitely something to enter in and also support, a new organization on the scene that are trying to host some
They're
tournaments.
definitely trying to grow the local scene a little bit,
yeah,
which is very cool to see.
Yeah, that's definitely good.
Yeah, give them the support. Give them the support. Because last time I believe they didn't have enough players.
Yeah, I think so. But now, hopefully, with the new expansion, everybody should be interested in playing and getting their money worth. So, yeah, that's all we have for this week. Thanks a lot for joining me. If you want to find out more about what we're doing during the week or ask us any questions about the new expansion, you can find us on Twitter. You can find Pandemonia over there at Pandemonia ZA with a 3 and a 0 because he hates me. Yep, it's got a 3 and a 0 in there. You can see it on the screen. You can find Zamok at Zamok_HS, and you can find myself at Dib_gaming on Twitter. You can also comment on the YouTube VOD for this, and also please leave us any feedback regarding the podcast. We welcome any kind of feedback. And yeah, thanks a lot for tuning in, everyone. See you next week.